I knew it would drive them insane. I also knew I'd never be invited back. But at 3:17 p.m., when my finger hit send on that internal email, I felt lighter than I had in years. Right as the $500,000 contract was about to be signed, I vanished like I'd never existed. And they never saw it coming. My name is Rachel Whitmore, and for 5 years, I was the invisible backbone of Gray Line Strategies, a boutique advertising agency nestled in Portland's Pearl District. At 33, I'd already closed more deals than most account executives see in a decade. But you wouldn't know it from looking at the company's win reports or listening to the Monday morning victory laps in our glass-walled conference room. The office was everything you'd expect from a progressive agency: exposed brick walls, kombucha on tap, standing desks that nobody actually used standing. But beneath the millennial-friendly veneer lurked something far more insidious: a culture that consumed talent and excreted credit to those who knew how to play the game. Brad Keene was the master of this game. Our sales director had the kind of artificially whitened smile that made clients feel important and a handshake firm enough to seal deals he'd never actually worked on. He wore Tom Ford suits to casual Fridays and had this habit of leaning back in his Herman Miller chair during meetings, fingers steepled like he was contemplating something profound when really he was just waiting for someone else to provide the answer he'd later claim as his own. Then there was Stephanie Draxler, our CEO. She'd built her reputation on being a champion for women in advertising, giving talks at conferences about breaking glass ceilings while systematically ensuring women like me remained firmly beneath them. She had this way of pulling you aside for candid conversations where she'd express how valued you were, right before explaining why you weren't quite ready for that promotion, that title change, that recognition you'd earned 3 times over. "Rachel, you're so essential to our team dynamic," she'd say, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. "I just worry that moving you up too quickly might disrupt the beautiful synergy you've created in your current role." Beautiful synergy. That's what she called it when I stayed until midnight fixing Brad's botched presentations, when I salvaged client relationships he'd nearly torched with his ego, when I generated the insights that became collaborative team efforts in the quarterly reports. The worst part wasn't even the stolen credit, it was the gaslighting. The way they'd make you question whether you were being too sensitive when you noticed your ideas presented as someone else's. The subtle implications that you should be grateful just to be in the room, even when you were the one who'd built the entire presentation deck from scratch. My only real ally had been Lena Morrison, a brilliant strategist who'd joined 6 months after me. We'd bonded over late-night sessions trying to decode client feedback that Brad had mangled in translation, over shared glances during meetings when our work was attributed to the team, while Brad's mediocre contributions were highlighted by name. But Lena was gone now, pushed out 2 months ago after she'd made the mistake of correcting Brad in front of a client. "It's just not a culture fit," Stephanie had explained during the all-hands meeting announcing Lena's decision to pursue other opportunities. The message was clear: stay in line or join the exodus of talented women who'd mysteriously found better culture fits elsewhere. I should have left then. But I had something they needed: the Nordic Tech deal. A Danish software company looking to break into the American market with a $500,000 campaign budget. I'd been cultivating that relationship for 8 months, flying to Copenhagen on my own dime when the company wouldn't approve the travel expense, learning enough Danish to make our initial conversations feel personal, understanding their product architecture better than our own tech team. And now, as I sat at my desk on another gray Portland morning, watching Brad's LinkedIn update about spearheading international expansion opportunities, I knew exactly what was coming. The same pattern, the same theft, just with higher stakes. But this time, I was ready. This time, I had a plan. The unraveling began with a forwarded email that Brad had carelessly included me on. Hidden in a chain of messages between him and Stephanie was my entire Nordic Tech presentation. Every slide I'd crafted. Every market analysis I'd conducted at 2 a.m. Every cultural insight I'd gleaned from my conversations with their team. Only now. The footer read, "Prepared by Brad Keene, Sales Director." My hands trembled as I scrolled through the thread. There it was, Stephanie's response. Excellent work, Brad. This is exactly why you're ready for that VP position. Let's discuss after we close Nordic Tech. I minimized the window and walked calmly to the bathroom, where I locked myself in a stall and let the rage wash over me. 8 months. 8 months of relationship building, of learning their business inside and out, of crafting a campaign strategy that spoke to their Scandinavian sensibilities while appealing to American markets. And Brad, who'd asked me just last week what UI stood for, was about to ride my work to a vice presidency. That afternoon, I started documenting everything. Screenshots of email threads, Slack conversations where Brad asked me to walk him through the client's needs one more time. Zoom recordings where I'd presented strategies while Brad sat silent, only to later claim them in executive meetings I wasn't invited to. My personal Google Drive became a vault of evidence, meticulously organized by date and project. The Nordic Tech deal was scheduled to close in 2 weeks. The contract value had climbed to $500,000 after I'd identified additional opportunities in their product pipeline, insights Brad couldn't have found with a map and compass. The client loved our approach, especially what they called the authentic understanding of their company culture. Of course they did. I'd spent hours on video calls with their team, learning not just their business needs, but their communication styles, their concerns about American market perception, their deep commitment to transparency and ethical business practices. Rachel, I'm going to need you to stay late this weekend, Brad announced on Tuesday, hovering over my desk with that practiced look of authority. We need to finalize the Nordic Tech materials. The presentation is already complete, I said evenly. I sent it to you last Friday. Right, but I need you to polish it. You know, make sure everything flows for when I present to the clients on Monday. When I present, not when we present. The mask wasn't even trying to stay on anymore. Also, he added, already walking away, I'll need all your background research transferred to the shared drive. Just want to make sure the team has access to everything. The team, by which he meant himself. That evening, I discovered the final insult. While organizing my files, I found the meeting invitation for the contract signing, scheduled for Monday at 3:30 p.m. PST to accommodate Copenhagen time. The attendee list included Brad, Stephanie, our legal counsel, and the entire Nordic Tech executive team. My name was nowhere to be found. But there was something Brad didn't know. Something that made me smile for the first time in weeks as I sat in my apartment. Laptop open, crafting my resignation letter. The Nordic Tech team had been corresponding with me directly through my personal email, a practice that had started when our company's servers went down during a critical negotiation period. I'd never transitioned those conversations back to my corporate account. Every technical specification, every strategic discussion, every relationship-building exchange lived in my personal Gmail, protected by passwords the company didn't have. More importantly, Anders Larsen, Nordic Tech's CEO, had specifically mentioned in our last call how much he valued working with someone who understood their company's ethics. We only do business with people we trust, Rachel, he'd said in his precise English. This is why we chose Greyline, because of you. Brad was about to learn what happened when you built a house of cards on someone else's foundation. I spent the rest of the week playing the perfect employee. I stayed late, answered Brad's increasingly panicked questions about client preferences, even helped him practice pronouncing Copenhagen correctly. All while finalizing my exit strategy, scheduling emails, and preparing for 3:17 p.m. on Monday, a time I'd chosen with surgical precision. Because at 3:15, Brad would be in the conference room, connected to Copenhagen, ready to close the biggest deal of his fabricated career. And at 3:17, he'd realize that the one person the client actually trusted had just vanished, along with every bit of institutional knowledge that made the deal possible. Saturday morning arrived with typical Portland drizzle, and I found myself at my desk at 7 a.m., not because Brad had demanded it, but because I needed to perfect my exit. The office was empty except for the ghost of every weekend I'd sacrificed to this place, and I used the solitude to execute my plan with surgical precision. First, I created comprehensive documentation for every single one of my active accounts, except Nordic Tech. These I uploaded to the shared drive with detailed transition notes, contact histories, and strategic recommendations. Anyone reviewing my work would see a model employee ensuring continuity. What they wouldn't see was the glaring omission of our biggest pending deal. Brad's text came at 10 a.m. Need you to prep a one-pager on Nordic Tech's decision-making process. Include all stakeholder personalities and preferences. Thanks. I smiled at my screen. Already prepared, I'll send it over in an hour. What I sent was a document so generic it could have described any Scandinavian tech company. Consensus-driven culture. Value transparency. Appreciate directness. The kind of surface-level insights anyone could have pulled from a Business Insider article about Nordic corporate culture, but Brad wouldn't know the difference. He'd never bothered to learn. Sunday was when the cracks in Brad's confidence began to show. His calls came every 2 hours, each more frantic than the last. Rachel, what was that thing Anders mentioned about their Q2 product launch? The integration with their existing platform, I replied smoothly, giving him just enough to stop the immediate panic, but not enough to actually succeed. It's all about seamless user experience. Right. And the budget allocation for Phase 2? That depends on Phase 1 performance metrics. I could hear him scribbling notes, trying to capture smoke with his bare hands. Every answer I gave was technically true but practically useless without the context I'd built over months of relationship development. Context that lived in my head and my personal email account. By Sunday night, I'd drafted my resignation email 17 times. Not because I was uncertain, but because I wanted it to be perfect, professional, unassailable. The kind of letter that would be forwarded to HR and legal with no recourse for retaliation. After 5 years of dedicated service to Greyline Strategies, I am resigning from my position as account executive, effective immediately. I have uploaded transition documents for all active accounts to the shared drive. My company equipment will be returned to the front desk by end of business today. I wish the team success in their future endeavors. No mention of Nordic Tech. No hint of the bomb about to detonate in tomorrow's meeting. Just the clean, clinical exit of someone who'd finally had enough. Monday morning arrived with unusual sunshine, as if Portland itself was celebrating my liberation. I dressed in my best blazer, the one I'd bought for the promotion interview that never materialized, and arrived at the office at 8 a.m. Brad was already there, pacing his office, rehearsing his presentation to the walls. Rachel. He practically lunged at me when I walked by. I need you to sit in on the call, just in case there are any technical questions. I have a conflict. I lied smoothly. But you've got this. You've been working so hard on this deal. The relief and pride that washed over his face was almost comical. Yeah, I really have. This is going to change everything for us. I mean, for the company. I spent the morning methodically clearing my desk, each personal item disappearing into my bag while maintaining the appearance of a normal workday. My succulents went into a box. The Danish phrase book I'd bought with my own money slipped into my purse. 5 years reduced to a banker's box and a bag. At 2:45, I made my final rounds. Stopped by IT to confirm my access would be revoked upon resignation. Dropped my keycard at reception with instructions to hold it for HR. Sent my final legitimate emails to clients I genuinely enjoyed working with. Careful to use only my corporate account, leaving no trail back to my personal correspondence. At 3:10, I was back at my desk. Resignation email queued, watching Brad strut toward the main conference room with Stephanie at his side. They were laughing about something, probably counting their chickens before they'd even entered the henhouse. At 3:15, I heard the Zoom chime echo from the conference room as they connected to Copenhagen. Anders's voice carried through the thin walls, warm, professional, expecting to finalize a partnership built on trust and mutual understanding. At 3:16, I closed my laptop, tucked it under my arm, and stood up. My finger hovered over my phone screen. The Gmail app open. Resignation email ready to go. At 3:17, I hit send. The swoosh sound was barely audible, but to me, it rang like a bell of freedom. I picked up my box, slung my bag over my shoulder, and walked toward the exit. As I passed the conference room, I could hear Brad's voice, confident and commanding. Anders, we're thrilled to move forward with this partnership. As I've been spearheading this initiative, I didn't stop to listen to the rest. I had 43 minutes before Anders would ask to speak with the person who'd actually been managing their account. 43 minutes before Brad realized that every password, every direct contact, every piece of crucial context he needed was walking out the door. The Portland sun felt warm on my face as I exited the building. Behind me, a $500,000 deal was about to collapse, and for the first time in 5 years, that wasn't my problem to solve. I made it to my car before my phone started exploding. The first call came at 3:19, Brad's name flashing on the screen. I let it ring, placing the phone face down on the passenger seat as I pulled out of the parking garage for the last time. By the time I reached the first stoplight, I had 7 missed calls and a cascade of increasingly frantic texts. Rachel, where are you? Need you in conference room now. This is not professional. Call me back. I turned off read receipts 2 days ago. Let them wonder if I was even seeing their messages. The real chaos, I learned later from a former colleague who'd witnessed it all, started at exactly 3:31 p.m. Anders had been nodding politely through Brad's generic presentation when he'd finally interrupted with the question that changed everything. This is all very interesting, Brad, but I'd like to discuss the implementation timeline with Rachel. She and I have been working through some specific technical requirements that need to be addressed before we sign. Is she joining us? The silence that followed was apparently deafening. Brad's fumbling response, something about me being temporarily unavailable, only made things worse. Stephanie's attempt to smooth things over hit a wall of Scandinavian directness. I'm confused, Anders had said, his English becoming more clipped as his comfort level dropped. Rachel has been our primary contact for 8 months. She understands our systems, our constraints, our vision. We specifically chose Greyline because of her expertise. Are you telling me she's not part of this project moving forward? Brad tried to recover, assuring them that he was fully briefed on all aspects of the account. Then Anders asked about the API integration challenges they'd discussed in their last technical call, a call Brad didn't even know had happened, covering issues he couldn't have understood if I'd drawn him a picture. Meanwhile, I was sitting in a coffee shop in Selwood, watching the emails pile up in my personal inbox. HR demanding I respond immediately. Legal suggesting I review my employment agreement. Stephanie's assistant asking me to please call as soon as possible. I archived them all without reading, except for one that made me smile, a direct message from Anders Larson. Rachel, I hope everything is all right. We were surprised not to see you in today's meeting. If you're experiencing any difficulties with your current position, please know that Nordic Tech values genuine expertise and ethical business partnerships above all else. We'd be interested in discussing potential consulting arrangements directly with you. Should you be available? I didn't respond. Not yet. But I did forward it to my personal attorney, whom I'd retained the previous week in anticipation of this moment. Back at Greyline, the meeting had devolved into damage control. Brad attempted to access the shared drive to pull up my Nordic Tech files, only to find the generic trash I'd uploaded. He tried to log into the CRM to review my contact notes, passworded sections that IT wouldn't be able to crack until the next day. Even the email threads he tried to reference were useless without the context of my personal correspondence with the client. We seem to be having some technical difficulties, Stephanie had said, her CEO smile starting to crack. Perhaps we could reschedule once we've sorted out these minor issues. Minor issues? Anders's tone could have frozen the Pacific. You've just told me that the person we've been working with exclusively, the person who understands our needs, our culture, our technical requirements, has suddenly vanished. And you call this minor? The final blow came when Anders asked Brad a simple question. What's our primary concern about entering the U.S. market? Any account executive worth their salt would have known the answer. I'd spent 3 calls discussing their fear of being seen as just another European company trying to Americanize their product, losing their core identity in the process. Our entire campaign strategy was built around maintaining their Nordic values while appealing to American sensibilities. Brad's answer? Market penetration and ROI maximization. The Zoom call ended at 3:47 p.m. Nordic Tech's legal team sent a formal notice at 4:15, stating they were reconsidering the partnership pending clarification of account management inconsistencies. By 5 p.m., when I was enjoying a glass of wine at home, Greyline's leadership team was in full crisis mode. The voicemails had evolved from angry to desperate. Stephanie's final message, left at 6:43 p.m., was a masterpiece of corporate manipulation. Rachel, I'm very concerned about you. This isn't like you at all. Whatever's happening, we can work through it together. You're such a valued member of our team. Please call me back so we can discuss your future here at Greyline. My future at Greyline, as if I had one, as if I'd ever had one. I deleted the voicemail and opened my laptop. There was work to do, not for them, but for me. I had a consulting business to register, a LinkedIn profile to update, and a response to draft for Anders Larsen. The Nordic Tech deal was dead at Greyline. But something told me it was about to be reborn somewhere else, with proper attribution this time. The aftermath at Greyline was swift and brutal. By Tuesday morning, the story had spread through Portland's tight-knit agency network like wildfire. I heard the details from Sarah, a junior designer who'd always been kind to me, speaking in hushed tones from a coffee shop bathroom. It's absolute chaos, she whispered. Brad's been in Stephanie's office since 7 a.m. They've called an emergency all hands for noon. Legal's here, HR's here, I've never seen anything like it. The $500,000 Nordic Tech deal wasn't just dead, it was actively decomposing. Anders had sent a formal letter stating that Greyline had fundamentally misrepresented their account team, and that any future negotiations would require complete transparency regarding personnel and their actual contributions to the partnership. But the Nordic Tech fallout was just the beginning. Word traveled fast in the tech world, especially among Scandinavian companies who valued trust above all else. 2 other prospects in my pipeline, companies Brad didn't even know I'd been cultivating, reached out to my personal email asking if I was still their contact at Greyline. When I informed them I was no longer with the company, both expressed interest in continuing our conversations wherever you land next. Stephanie's damage control was a case study in corporate desperation. The all-hands meeting, according to Sarah, was a masterclass in gaslighting and blame shifting. She actually stood there and talked about team members who abandoned their responsibilities and how true professionals handle transitions appropriately. Sarah reported. Then Brad got up and gave this speech about how client relationships belong to the company, not individuals. The whole time, everyone was just staring at the empty chairs where you and Lena used to sit. The legal threat started Wednesday. A cease and desist letter arrived at my apartment, claiming I'd violated my employment agreement by taking proprietary client information. My attorney laughed when he read it. They're claiming ownership of relationships you built using your personal time and resources? He shook his head. And these client communications through your personal email, did they ever provide you with proper tools to do your job? They wouldn't approve my expense report for the Copenhagen trip. I paid for it myself. And the emails? Started using my personal account when their servers crashed during a critical negotiation. They never told me to stop. He smiled the smile of a lawyer who knew he'd win. They don't have a leg to stand on. By Thursday, the exodus had begun. Sarah texted me that 2 other account executives had given notice, both citing cultural misalignment in their resignation letters. The Portland Adweek newsletter ran a blind item about a prominent agency losing major international deal due to internal attribution disputes. Everyone knew exactly who they were talking about. But the most satisfying moment came Friday afternoon. I was sitting in my home office, finalizing my LLC paperwork, when an email arrived from Greyline's biggest competitor, Cascade Creative. Rachel, I heard through the grapevine that you might be exploring new opportunities. We've long admired your work, your actual work, not the version with someone else's name on it. Would you be interested in discussing a senior VP role? We believe in crediting people for their contributions here. I didn't respond immediately. I had 3 other offers to consider, plus Anders's increasingly attractive consulting proposition. Nordic Tech had formally terminated discussions with Greyline and was exploring alternative partnership structures, their polite way of saying they were waiting for me to hang my shingle. The beauty of my exit wasn't just in the timing, it was in the completeness. I'd left Greyline technically blameless but practically crippled. Every client relationship I'd built, every insight I'd gained, every strategy I developed, it all lived in my head and my personal accounts. I'd followed the letter of every policy while violating the spirit of their exploitation. Stephanie made one last attempt to salvage things. Her email, sent Friday evening, was a masterpiece of corporate manipulation masked as concern. Rachel, I've been reflecting on our time working together and realize we may not have fully recognized your contributions to the team. I'd love to discuss a new role we're creating, VP of Strategic Accounts, that would properly reflect your value to Greyline. The Nordic Tech situation has been a learning experience for all of us. A learning experience? 5 years of stolen credit, silenced voices, and suppressed potential, reduced to a learning experience. I crafted my response carefully. Stephanie, I appreciate your reflection. However, I've chosen to pursue opportunities that align with my values of transparency and authentic attribution. I wish Greyline success in creating a culture that genuinely recognizes all contributions. My attorney will handle any further necessary communications. The following Monday, Cascade Creative announced my hiring as Senior VP of International Accounts. The same day, Nordic Tech announced they'd selected an independent consultant for their U.S. market entry, unnamed. But anyone who mattered knew it was me. Brad's LinkedIn profile quietly removed spearheading international expansion from his bio. Stephanie's next Women in Leadership conference talk was mysteriously canceled. And somewhere in Portland, in a gleaming office with exposed brick and kombucha on tap, my empty desk served as a monument to what happens when you build your empire on someone else's foundation. The bill for my expertise had finally come due, and Greyline couldn't afford to pay it. It wasn't about revenge, not really. Sitting in my new corner office at Cascade Creative, watching the Portland skyline shift from gray to gold in the afternoon light, I finally understood what had driven me to orchestrate such a precise professional execution. The revelation came while sorting through old files on my personal drive. 5 years of evidence I'd unconsciously compiled. Not just stolen presentations and misdirected credit, but something deeper. Screenshots of 3 a.m. timestamps on work I'd submitted. Email threads where my solutions were dismissed, only to resurface in Brad's Monday morning presentations. Performance reviews where collaboration meant accepting invisibility and team player translated to doormat. But it was finding the photo that broke something open in me. Dad, taken just a month before the cancer one, standing outside his own small business, Morrison Automotive, the shop he'd built from nothing. He'd send it to me with a simple message. Never let them convince you that your work isn't yours. Your name means something. Rachel. My name. That's what they'd stolen. Not just credit or recognition, but the fundamental right to have my work bear my name. Dad had understood something I'd forgotten in the fluorescent haze of corporate life. Your work is an extension of who you are. To let someone else claim it is to erase yourself, one project at a time. I thought about Lena, brilliant Lena who'd been pushed out for the crime of refusing erasure. We'd had drinks once after she'd left, and she'd said something that haunted me. The worst part isn't that they steal from you. It's that they make you complicit in your own theft. You start believing that's just how things work. That's what Greyline had done. Created an ecosystem where theft was rebranded as collaboration, where women like us were taught to be grateful for the opportunity to be plundered. They'd gaslight you into thinking you were selfish for wanting your name on your work, too aggressive for speaking up in meetings, not a team player for questioning why Brad's name appeared on strategies he couldn't even explain. The Nordic tech deal had been my breaking point. But looking back, I'd been building toward that 3:17 p.m. resignation for years. Every swallowed objection, every redirected compliment, every time I'd smiled and said it was a team effort when it wasn't, they'd all been small deaths. Little surrenders that had accumulated until there was almost nothing left of the woman my father had raised. Almost nothing. But not quite nothing. Because somewhere beneath the corporate conditioning, that woman had been planning. She'd been saving emails, documenting patterns, building relationships that belonged to her, not to the company that refused to value her. She'd been waiting for the perfect moment to demonstrate the difference between a title and actual expertise, between claiming work and creating it. The Portland agency world was small, and word traveled. I heard from former colleagues about the ripple effects of my exit. 3 more women had left Greyline within a month. Stephanie's progressive reputation had taken a hit she couldn't speechify her way out of. Brad had been quietly reassigned to smaller accounts, his incompetence no longer masked by the talented women he'd built his career on. But I didn't track these developments with satisfaction. If anything, I felt a strange sort of grief. Grief for the years I'd lost, for the woman I'd let myself become in that gleaming prison. Grief for all the Rachels still sitting at desks across the city, across the country, drafting brilliance that would bear someone else's name. My father had been dead for 3 years, but I could still hear his voice, gruff from years of engine exhaust, but always gentle with me. Your work is your signature on the world, kiddo. Don't let anyone forge it. At Cascade, my name was on everything I touched. The Nordic Tech campaign launched under my direction, with my strategies, bearing my signature. When Anders sent a congratulatory email about our first quarter metrics, he CC'd my CEO with a note. This is why we chose to work with Rachel. Authenticity recognizes authenticity. I kept that email in a folder labeled, Dad would have been proud. The truth was, I hadn't quit Greyline to destroy them, I'd quit to save myself. The fact that my absence revealed their hollow core was merely a consequence of how thoroughly they'd depended on the very people they'd refused to recognize. I'd removed a load-bearing wall they'd been pretending was decorative. Sometimes, the most devastating thing you can do to a system built on exploitation is simply refuse to participate. To take your talents, your relationships, your hard-won expertise, and walk away. To demonstrate, with surgical precision, the difference between position and power, between authority and ability. They'd thought my work belonged to them, but my work was me, my insights, my relationships, my 3 a.m. solutions to problems they couldn't even articulate. And me, I belonged to no one but myself. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. The coffee shop on Southeast Division was nothing special. Just another Portland cafe with exposed beams and mismatched furniture. But it had become my sanctuary. The place where I drafted my resignation, planned my exit, and now, 6 months later, where I conducted meetings for my consulting firm. I was reviewing the latest Nordic Tech campaign metrics when my phone buzzed. A bank notification. I almost ignored it, then did a double take at the amount. The wire transfer from Copenhagen was substantial. My quarterly performance bonus based on the campaign's success. But that wasn't what made me smile. It was the memo line. For Rachel Whitmore, with gratitude for authentic partnership. My name, my work, my rewards. I closed my laptop and let myself truly feel the weight of what had happened. Not the dramatic exit, not the collapsed deal, not even the poetic justice of Brad's downfall. But this. Sitting in a sunlit cafe, building something that was entirely mine, working with people who valued transparency as much as talent. The barista refilled my coffee, and I noticed her name tag. Lena. Not my Lena. But the synchronicity made me think of her. She'd started her own strategy firm too. And we'd recently partnered on a project. 2 women who'd been told they weren't culture fits, now defining culture on our own terms. My phone buzzed again. An email from a potential client, referred by Anders. Another Scandinavian company. Another team that valued honest communication over corporate theater. The message was addressed to me, not to a team, not to a company, just to Rachel Whitmore, the consultant who'd built a reputation on authentic expertise. I thought about Gray Line sometimes. Not with anger anymore, just a sort of distant pity. They'd had access to so much talent, so many brilliant women who could have transformed their business. Instead, they'd built a machine designed to harvest our work while erasing our names. They'd confused exploitation with efficiency, theft with leadership. The last I'd heard, they'd lost 3 more major accounts. Stephanie had brought in a consulting firm to address their cultural challenges. Brad had moved to a different agency, where, presumably, he was learning that you can't build a career on stolen foundations indefinitely. Eventually, everyone discovers you're standing on someone else's work. But that wasn't my concern anymore. My concern was the proposal on my screen, the clients who trusted me, the business I was building one authentic relationship at a time. No glass ceilings here, I'd built my own house, with windows wide open to possibility. I raised my coffee cup in a silent toast to Lena, wherever she was building her empire. To all the women still trapped in their gray lines, documenting their erasure, planning their escapes. To my father, who'd taught me that my name meant something. And to 3:17 p.m. on a Monday afternoon, the moment I'd chosen myself over a system that had never chosen me. The autumn light slanted through the windows, turning everything golden. Somewhere across town, in a building with exposed brick and kombucha on tap. My old desk probably sat occupied by another hopeful, talented woman. I hoped she was taking notes, building her own evidence file, preparing for her own 3:17 moment. Because here's what I'd learned. They can steal your work, claim your ideas, erase your contributions. They can gaslight you into believing you should be grateful for the opportunity to be exploited. They can build entire careers on the foundations you've laid. But they can't steal your expertise. They can't replicate relationships built on authentic connection. And when you finally walk away, taking with you everything that actually mattered, they're left holding nothing but titles and empty presentations, wondering why their house of cards collapsed so spectacularly. My phone lit up with another notification. Anders again. This time with a photo from their Copenhagen office, their team raising glasses to toast the campaign's success. The caption read, "To partnerships built on truth." I smiled, took another sip of coffee, and got back to work. My work. With my name on it. The revenge wasn't in their downfall. It was in my rising. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below, and let's connect. If this resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts or experiences. Have you ever had your own 3:17 p.m. moment? I'd love to hear about it in the comments below.